Good evening. Tonight's video is going to have basically one topic, and that is the election and the impact this is most likely going to have on the war in the Ukraine, the deportation of all the illegal people we have accumulated here, and tariffs and the economy in general. Let me see where we can get started on this, because all of this is sort of intertwined and interrelated. Now, if you have watched my videos for the last 2 or 3 years, then you have seen that I kind of tended towards this direction, which is more the Democrats were basically bullying Trump, and, with all the criminal cases and Congress and this, that, and the other thing, and now the 2 assassination attempts basically got him into a godlike status over here, and we have seen this in the election on how this unfolded. He had the highest popular vote, that is the actual vote count by voters, and he got over 300 some odd electoral votes. So he got a pretty good result there. And part of this issue, of course, was what I pointed out in my other video, was the coming about of Kamala Harris, the way the Democrats went by the procrastination of Joe Biden of not stepping out or down further, or at least opening up the race for for their candidate and that sort of stuff. That's all now watered down the drain, basically, at this point, and the Democrats will have to see on how they're going to recuperate from this. As I also mentioned in my videos, that the Democrats, among quite a few Republicans, are not in the here and now at the moment, or have been in the past, and are not probably going to be here in the future. And so they're heavily disconnected from the actual realities of the ordinary people who have to live a ordinary life here in the United States, which includes me too. And, with the daily struggles, some of us have it a little bit easier. Some of them, they're struggling more with high prices, inflation, and everything that comes with it. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at this. So first, Russia said now, Putin said he's not going to talk to Trump. Now it turns out he did talk to Trump on Thursday. And I guess Trump pointed out in that conversation on how many U.S. forces are already in Europe, in Western Europe. And I guess he didn't say anything more, and that he should start, or Putin should start thinking about of how he's going to end this war, how he's going to get out of it. It is also assumed at this point that the territorial gains, I would put that in apostrophe, by the Russians or the Ukrainians on either side, is going to be frozen. There's going to be a demilitarized zone between Russia, the Russian Federation, and the Ukrainian front lines at this point, where there's no military. On who's going to monitor this for a ceasefire, and how demilitarized it is, and who's going to monitor it, is going to be a different question. We will see. Basically, for the moment, Zelensky's goals of getting Crimea eventually back, if that was a goal, or the other occupied territories, in the Donbas region there, they're probably not going to be returned. So this is kind of where it's at. It's going to stay there where it's at the moment, but the weapons are going to cease to fire, basically, and then we can work everything else out. No win situation for either one, because the Russian Federation sure didn't accomplish their goal of getting then the Nazis out of the office. Zelensky would be still in the office at that point, plus his government. So that would not be accomplished. On the other hand, is the territorial regains, or getting the Donbas region and Crimea back to the Ukraine, would be out of the window too. So it's a it's a no-win situation for either of the two sides, except that the dying is going to stop, which would be good finally. There's way so many people who have died in this war to begin with. Now, with that having that basically recapped here at the moment, the time frame to this is, I would say, probably the sooner the better. And I think that's how Donald Trump feels about this. And I guess with Elon Musk being in this picture now, who has become now his best friend, his BF, that needs to be seen. Starlink for the Ukraine, no Starlink for the Ukraine, or what have you. That's all little details, schnick-schnack around here. But in the general direction, it's going to be a ceasefire here sooner than later. That is to be expected. Now let's go on to the next thing, and that is really interwoven. So we have now the tariffs. That is his pet project. Estimates range somewhere around 20% of tariffs for goods and everything coming from anywhere in the world, including Europe. 100%, some say 60% of goods coming from China, whatever that is, anything, and up to 200% for automobiles which are manufactured in Mexico. And that is directly interrelated with the entire, illegal immigration we had down there on the southern border between Mexico and the United States. Our current situation is as follows: is the labor market here is pretty much, we have full employment. We have around 4% or less than 4% unemployment rate. That means everyone who is working, who wants to work, basically has a job. There's some floating around probably trying to figure out what they want to do. And those people who are either male, female, or anything in between, excuse me, who are on Instagram, OnlyFans, and God knows what else there is, TikTok, YouTubers who are making a living in one way, form, shape, or the other with this stuff, they will not be entering the workforce anytime soon. And of course, that is all across the board, with the majority of them being US citizens. The situation here for us is that in the agricultural environment, agricultural sector, and in the food processing sector, that means all of your stuff, the food processing, meat and poultry production, from the slaughterhouses to the actual processors for steaks and ground beef and pork, God knows what else, is to 95% all staffed by foreigners, mostly illegal immigrants, because they're the only ones willing to work in these environments. Then the construction sector. There's not many Americans, US citizens, who like to work in the construction sector or in the food processing sector or in the agricultural sector because of the hard labor, physically demanding jobs basically are out the window. And so when Trump says now he's going to deport all of these people, then we will have to wait and see. Because if he does that and he starts collecting the wrong people, sending them home, then either our food production is going to cease to exist and you won't be able to get anything, or the agricultural sector is going to collapse, or the construction sector is going to collapse. What we're talking about here is primarily, first of all the criminal elements which have come into the country from various different countries, primarily Latin America. But I want to emphasize one thing: Latin America is not typical, for having bad people normally living there. The great majority of those countries have honorable citizens, and most of these immigrants who have come up here are hardworking people who have no criminal records whatsoever. However, in this whole mix, there is some really bad people who came in here, gang-related stuff, that had to do with the trafficking of these people and other crimes. We have the drug trade coming in with all variety of drugs, illicit drugs, which have been causing a lot of problems here in the United States. So this is going to be their main target, is going to be, first of all, the criminal elements to get them out of here. And, if one of these people who killed 7 people already is sitting in jail, he's not going to do anything for the workforce enrichment here in the United States to begin with. With this being said, is the next group, which is easily deported or more easily deported, is 1.3 million immigrants here who had applied for asylum, but their cases were denied, and they have exhausted all legal remedies in the appeals process for their cases. So they should be leaving the country. They may have not left, or they have not left the country yet, and they're still here. These are the first 2 groups, and that will keep them busy because you're looking at quite a few people, and the government will have to set this, first of all, up. Trump wants the National Guards in the United States. Let me explain that to the foreign viewers. Is each state in the United States has a National Guard. The National Guard is a para-police military group which is used for anti-riot measures or in catastrophes. Like when you have hurricanes and flooding and that sort of stuff. They're usually the first ones called in by the state governors, and they defend the states primarily. We also have private militias in each state, in most states, which are made up of private citizens, and they're armed because we have the constitutional right to bear arms. And they would basically back up certain, activities if the federal government was to go out of control to protect our rights and liberties here in these states. And then you have the U.S. military, which cannot be used internally in the United States for policing activities at all, period. That is prohibited by the Constitution as well. They're only here to defend the United States. They have been called in only once in a natural disaster, but normally the natural disasters is also the responsibility of the National Guards. So he would mobilize the National Guards to do the deportations and the entire, logistics what comes with it. The National Guards could be fairly easily deployed, but we're not looking at a large military force, so to speak, with, I would say there's probably 25,000 members of each National Guard or so in each state. So you're looking probably at upwards to 1 million soldiers, which could be available for this task to deport 1.3 or more, 2 million people who have deportation orders already pending. This will give you an idea. Of course, this is all going to cost a lot of money because the National Guard is paid, and the soldiers who are then on active duty have to be paid, and there's a lot of cost associated with it. That is not a cheap undertaking. On the other hand now, and that is his tariffs, again, what I had pointed out, is what Trump will offer these countries like, for instance, Germany or France or whatever country is to come over here and set up a manufacturing facility for the U.S. market here. And then they won't have any tariffs on their products, and they can sell then their products here without tariffs, the same way we basically produce stuff here in the United States and sell it. And of course, these companies which have to be staffed, and we have already, I wouldn't call it a labor shortage, but we're basically having full employment. And if you have, say, like only 1,000 companies starting to opening up offices and manufacturing here, you're going to run out of labor very quickly, especially on the lower end of the spectrum, where we're looking at unskilled laborers and, barely or limited training laborers, basically, so to speak. They would be off, so he can't really deport these people who came over here because they're already an integral force, a part of our workforce here at the moment. That has kind of evolved and established itself out of the coronavirus shutdown and everything that came with that. So they filled up a lot of voids. And then the other thing is That void created also was created by the baby boomers retiring in ever larger numbers, and they were called boomers because that was a very large group of people, and they're going to put a big burden on the United States in terms of Social Security and Medicaid. Medicaid is our medical insurance when you are in retirement and you have to pay parts of the cost. You can buy into additional insurance. We call it Medicare supplement, and Part B, then you can get additional insurance and that pays more for your prescription medication, so you don't have to as much out-of-pocket expenses. But this is basically how that hole was created in our labor force, was the combination of it and the retirement age now coming into the baby boomer generation. My generation, which is next, I'm a Generation X. We are not as many humans as a group in terms of head count. The millennials are going to be a little bit more. And then comes the Z babies generation, the Z generation now, the young ones, which are in the workforce already fully integrated. And they're having a hard time because the older people now have all left already and they're taking on jobs and they don't have the skills yet. So this all has to develop. So this is a volatile mix here we got, and this is going to take a lot of common sense and foresight to work our way through this. And then on top of this is Elon Musk wants to take over the reformation of the government, of the federal government, to make the federal government more efficient. And I guess there's going to be not direct layoffs, but what Musk said is what he envisions is that he wants to send these people into early retirement, or they're going to give them a golden parachute, what we call it. That means they start working, but they're going to get paid for another couple of years, but they will be out of the workforce almost instantaneously. And that is he's going to target, probably as any corporate person, is going to target, first of all, the older people because they have the highest paychecks. They're going to go first because that will reduce the payrolls of the federal government in the long run. And they will get that, I think, for a period of 2 years. That will leave the government and on all sorts of levels, the federal government, short-ended. And that will further complicate the whole matter in terms of immigration. The other question is how many H-1B visas or H-2B visas are going to be issued. It's going to be a different story. They have to evaluate this. These are the visas for engineers, lawyers, doctors, all the higher educated people who are usually sponsored by an American company to come to the United States and work a specific job at that company. If the company no longer needs you or closes down, for instance, then you have 6 months' time here on that kind of a visa. They're usually issued for 2 years and then 5 years. If that visa hasn't expired, you have to basically find new employment, and that means you have to find another American company who's going to sponsor you while you're in the United States. If that doesn't happen within 6 months, you are supposed to be leaving the United States. There is a certain amount of people here who had come over here in the last 40 years or 30 years on H-1B and H-2B visas who lost their jobs, with COVID and before COVID with the deindustrialization we've gone through. And they're basically in the country now illegal, working probably lower paying jobs or maybe working something from home, doing some form of freelance work. That would be another group for deportation, but this is going to be very questionable if he's ever going to go that far to actually sort these people out and trying to find them and then deport them. Because in the end, if he needs engineers or doctors or nurses or anyone with a highly skilled, like machinists, for instance, machinists, if he sends them out and then the other companies come to set up manufacturing and they need this, they won't have anyone here. You would have to bring them back over here. That may not work. or they may going to cap all of this altogether with the visas for the moment. Travel bans on certain countries, like from the Middle East, I do not know if we're going to see it as much as we did in 2017 when he instituted this, because the threat levels, with the Afghanistan war, that all ended over there and that sort of stuff, has changed the dynamics in it. But I don't have any classified information to assess the threats out of the region and what that possibly could entail in terms of travel bans from citizens of those countries. So this is kind of where this whole thing is. It's going to be interesting to see the voters here in the United States, as in any other country where people vote uh, in a fair election. Basically, what we had, they vote with their wallet. What we call this. The Democrats right now are deep thought about this, of why they lost and this and the other thing. It is really, really that simple. The ordinary citizen will vote with their wallet, that's it. Yeah. And so if their wallet, if their lifestyle, if their livelihood or their level they have attained is threatened, they're gonna go very radical. This was the same in Nazi Germany when the Nazis were first elected, 1932-33. That was a similar vote there, but the Nazis had then only, I think, 20-some% or in the low 30s, so they never got over 50% level to begin with in the regular election when it was free and open in the Weimar Republic. But it was a signal, and it was a signal to the established parties, whether it was the conservative, the middle, in the middle kind of parties, and it was also a signal to the left that they were not interested in their prototyping of a new type of society with different values and different ideas and that sort of stuff. And they sure weren't interested in anyone who's talking about or thinking about basically, what is that called, when the government takes over your property and basically you no longer own the company, but you have basically been enteignet. That's the German word for it. I forgot now what the English word is for it. I can't remember it. Well, anyway, when the government takes over and you get nothing, basically, and they're going to run this then as the government, they're going to run your business. That is the sort of this is not going to fly with any middle class, upper middle class, and lower middle class is not going to go for that. Some rich people who are not in the here and now, and then the bottom end of the poor people, basically, they will probably vote for this. That sounds might be interesting to them. Some other minority groups may have that may be appealing, but for the broad masses, this is nothing. If you threaten the standard of living of a large section of your population, you're going to have the voters running away, screaming in the other direction. And if that doesn't look good, it still doesn't matter. They're going to go in that direction. Anyway, we will see. There's hopefully peace. It would be nice to have peace, or at least a ceasefire in place in the Ukraine by Christmas at the latest. So we have a Christmas holiday again. And at that point, you probably can help fix, or the Ukrainian can start fixing their infrastructure without that being constantly destroyed, and turn on the heat, because the Ukrainians, and I feel very sorry for those people, they're going to be very cold, especially in the larger cities with the limited amount of electricity available. Unless they have oil heat, but then if you have a central heating system without electricity, your oil heating system, your central heating system will not work. Your steam heat will not work. With that, I wish you a great evening, and I will be tuning in here as the time permits and as events unfold. so to speak. I wish you a wonderful evening.